you have to have a thick skin. You have to be sort of a masochist. You have to be okay with people criticizing you. And the only way I can deal with it is say, anything I write, half the world's going to like it and half won't. And I'm going to pay attention to the half that does.
Welcome to Your Creative Mind. I'm Isolde Trachtenberg, and this podcast is all about using your innate creativity and mindfulness to build a life you love. Whether it's through writing, music, dance, theater, or any creative pursuit, we'll explore how to tap into your unique potential to transform your work, relationships, and daily life. Through inspiring conversations with world-changing artists, entrepreneurs, and innovators, or actionable insights in my solo episodes, you'll learn how to focus your energy, ignite your creativity, and bring more joy and purpose to everything you do. Hey there, and welcome to the Your Creative Mind podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I am thrilled to welcome this week's guest to the show. Why am I thrilled? First of all, she's a friend. She's also an incredibly best-selling author whom we adore. So I'm going to introduce you to Dawn Barclay. But before I do, I'm going to ask you, have you ever wondered what it takes to craft stories that keep readers hooked, whether in a psychological thriller or true crime? Dawn Barclay knows exactly how to do it. She's an award-winning author who writes gripping psychological suspense as D.M. Barr and insightful nonfiction under her own name. With 8 books to her credit, including Deadly When Disturbed and the upcoming Vacations Can Be Murder. How awesome does that sound? Dawn brings a unique blend of storytelling mystery and publishing know-how. So in this episode, she's going to share what makes a story unforgettable, how to stay true to your creative vision despite industry pressure, and the most effective ways to market your book without feeling like a salesperson. If you're a writer or a book lover, you're going to want to be in on this conversation. Dawn, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Isolde. I really appreciate it.
I I honestly, part of what this is for me, and I don't even know how to explain it as well as I would like. I feel like when I read your work, that I'm actually in your work. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I feel like I'm in the work with the characters. I'm in the story. And I would love to know from you, how do you do that? I mean, honestly, how do you make it so that when someone is reading your work, that they feel like they're actually in the story?
Well, thank you for that compliment. That's a wonderful thing to hear. I think it's probably because I write in third person close. So even though I'm not necessarily writing in first person, I give you a lot of internal dialogue.
Mm.
And so I think you feel like you're part of the action because you hear what she's thinking. And it's that part is sort of first person. So you can feel like you're part of it. And then I do multiple points of view in certain books. And so you are also in the mindset of the antagonist many times.
So when you're doing this, when you're writing these stories, I guess the way I want to look at it is psychological suspense, and you're writing nonfiction and you're writing true crime. They're very different worlds. And so I guess because you are that puppet master, what do you think the biggest mindset shift is that you have to make when you're switching among all of these different ways that you write stories? And do they ever influence each other in any surprising ways?
The true crime I write is, which is my nonfiction now, is True Crime Travel Guide. So it's very much a reference book. It's not really stories. I mean, I'm giving summaries of the biggest crimes in every state.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm giving a lot of other reference materials so that when you're reading about, say, Massachusetts, you're going to hear all the summaries throughout the state of major crimes, and then you're going to see more books to read on the subjects because I can only include, maybe 100 to 200 words on each crime. And then I've got the hotels that are either jail related or crime related, and I have haunted hotels, and the
Mm.
same thing with restaurants, whether there's a restaurant that used to be a jail or a courthouse or is haunted. And then I talk about major attractions like crime museums or police museums that you might want to see when you're in the area. Then I have where the jails are, where the bodies are buried, and itineraries that bring everything together, and even victim resources if, God forbid, anything horrible happens to you. So it's very much reference material as opposed to having a voice, let's say. The nonfiction book I wrote before this was called Traveling Different, and it was sort of the autism travel Bible. And there I do believe I had a voice, but it was the voice of the people I was interviewing as opposed to my voice. And so it is a very different mindset between fiction and nonfiction. And I'm doing an article next month for misdemeanors where I put in blog posts every month along with 9 other crime writers. And it's sort of like, what's the difference between writing fiction and nonfiction? And I used to kid around that my nonfiction had much fewer bodies. There's fewer murders. I can't say that anymore because there's far more murders in my nonfiction now that I'm writing true crime travel guides. But I think,
Yikes.
yeah, in terms of exposure, you're going to get
Mhm.
a lot more exposure through nonfiction because you're writing about things that maybe nobody has written before, whereas opposed to fiction where there are a lot of people writing psychological thrillers and your plot is different. But again, publishers want plots that they sort of know what's going to happen but are a little different, which is totally contradictory, but that's what they want. Um, my nonfiction is probably something that hasn't been seen before, but is pulling together a lot of information that people would have to search for in different ways. There's definitely a different mindset in terms of promotion, and there's definitely a difference in the money you make.
Okay, so I guess what this leads me to, as you were talking, I was kind of going, why the fascination with true crime? There are people out there, so many, there are true crime podcasts, there are uh, people doing true crime television shows. I mean, it started, I forget what it was called, Most Wanted or Unsolved Mysteries or something like
America's
that.
Most Wanted, I think, was one
Yes.
of the first ones.
Yeah. And wow, did we watch as a sort of as consumers, as people who watch TV, people dove right into that. They really wanted to know. And I know that there were people who I know who are actors, for example, people took it so seriously that the actors who portrayed the killers were sometimes, the police were called on them because the person thought it was the person who was the guilty party that they'd just seen in the grocery store. So we got really, as a nation, we got really fascinated and very invested. What do you think accounts for that?
It's the same reason why people watch car crashes and they can't look away, because I think they're just fascinated by the human mind and they can't believe the extent of the depravity in some people. I mean, I'm writing about cannibals and horrible people who torture other people, and uh I mean, I have to detach myself. I can't really, I feel numb toward it now because there's so much that I'm writing. I'm going to cover the whole country by the time I'm done. And there's a point where I just have to, I mean, this when I'm covering where the people are buried and I see the the grave plots on Find a Grave, and then I see children's pictures, that still gets to me.
Mm.
But I have to sort of look at it in a detached way and say, look at it, the psychology of it and what caused it and what happened in the people's lives to maybe cause that. And I think that is the separation for me. As to why people are fascinated by it, I don't know. I wrote the books because they were fascinated about it, and no one had written a travel book about it. So I figured there was an opening for me there because I my career was spent writing travel stories and also the business of travel. So I look at it from that particular viewpoint, and no one else had. So that's the way I saw it. Is there was an opening and no one had written it, so I wanted to write it.
It's fascinating to me. It's interesting to me. It does make me want to leave the room sometimes because you realize that it's something that when you're watching it or reading it or whatever, that it's something that actually happened. And I have friends, for example, who do paranormal investigations, and they're doing a similar kind of thing with looking at where you can go, like the most haunted hotel, the most haunted old hospital or whatever. And people really want to know. So it's fascinating to me. With Vacations Can Be Murder, this is something that is another, as you said, it's going to be another one of these travel guides. I guess the question I have to ask, as you were doing this research, what surprised you the most about writing the book and also the stuff that you actually found out?
Well, I mean, I didn't know any of it, so I found out everything. I was not a true crime addict, so I'm looking at it as a very, from a detached point of view. I didn't come in with a favorite serial killer or anything. I'm looking at it, researching history, really.
Mhm.
What surprised me, I mean, the amount of crime in New York surprised me to the point where I had to leave out the whole western part of the state and limit what I was going to write from the capital region down to Long Island, figuring that most people would fly into New York and maybe do day trips around the area to tour. Um, I was about 30,000 words in just for New York, and
Wow.
I had to cut out 3 states from the mid-Atlantic section of the book and create another book just for the capital region with DC and Virginia and all that, because between New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, I had close to 80,000 words, and that was the limit that the publisher wanted me to have. They wanted it to be a very portable book.
Hmm.
So that surprised me. And then I really there's a lot of cannibalism around.
Yikes.
So yeah, I found out what really upset me was that, I mean, I went to school in Boston. I didn't know anything about this. I could have been learning about it while I was there. I went to school in Connecticut, same thing. I lived on Long Island, same thing. I didn't know that. No, I'm not going to remember the name of the person. But there was a serial killer who, worked out of the planting fields in Oyster Bay. Joe Rifkin. Um, I grew up 5 minutes from there. My husband grew up like 5 minutes from a place, and I'm not going to remember this either, a place in Midwood where the mafia would chop up bodies and sort of process bodies that they had murdered and get rid of the bodies. So I said, did you know this was right in your neighborhood?
In Midwood
So
in Brooklyn?
yeah, I was in Brooklyn near Midwood.
I'm
So
I live in Midwood. Uh-oh.
yeah, you
Yikes.
got to buy the book to read the place. I apologize for not knowing the exact things because I'm right now involved in the third book. So as
Mm,
soon as I get to a new book, I sort of forget all the other stuff because there's so much information to
hmm.
process.
Hmm.
There's one or two killers that stay in my mind or stories that stay in my mind, and then the rest sort of vanishes until I have to do a podcast for like a specific area like Connecticut, and then I'll bone up on that to be able to speak intelligently. I guess you're getting the non-intelligent right now.
Well, even the not intelligent is still darn interesting. Yeah, it is fascinating to me what we're doing as storytellers. We titillate people, we excite them, we might frighten the crud out of them, we might have them sitting at the edge of their seats, but at the end of the day, we're still, I have to say it, we're business people, right? We are people who are writing stories or writing nonfiction to have other people read those stories. So you're going to cover the whole country with your nonfiction, I think that's super cool. Is it something, and I guess the way to ask this question is, what is the best thing that you're getting out of writing these true crime books?
I wouldn't say I'm obsessive compulsive. I'm probably anal in that I want to find all the information and make sure I include it all. And so for me, it's sort of like a treasure hunt. It's the same thing as shopping in a consignment store,
Mm,
that you're sort of on a treasure hunt. And I really find it interesting to find all the information and what's really unique. I mean, I have to leave out a lot of things. For New York, if you didn't kill like 4 or 5 people, you weren't in the book.
oh
I had to
my.
make some hard choices. And you had to have places that people could visit. So if
Mm.
there was, like the preppy killer in Central Park, I didn't really include him because we're in Central. You could go to Central Park, but you're not going to go to the exact spot where it happened. So far more interesting to cover Boston Strangler in the New England book because I had the addresses of all the apartment buildings where those
Wow.
people were killed. So if you want it, and the point of the book is really to go to all those places. I don't give exact house numbers for private homes because I don't want people knocking on doors or gawking outside people's homes. I give the like 0 to 100 block of a street. But for apartment buildings or offices, I give the addresses because, nobody's going to notice the people walking on the street outside an apartment building. But I wanted people to, I try to say that the book is as close as you can get to true crime while still breathing. So for me, the interesting part is finding the addresses. And you might have to research 10 different newspapers to find the exact address. And in some cases, I had to do my own detective work to figure out where the addresses were. And in those instances, I say, this probably happened here. And that's my way of saying that I did the research, and I talk about that in the intro so people understand that. And what's annoying about the research, and this is something I was surprised at, is how much different newspapers vary and different reference materials vary in fact. The ages of victims or the addresses or the spellings of their name. So that was, I mean, I've always thought that if it's the written word, it has to be true. Of course, those were in the old days with a whole different political era. But
Right.
I believe what I read was true, and so not. I mean, I see a lot of divergence from major news sources. So that was interesting. And in the book, I indicate where there's variation.
And that makes me wonder actually how often it's because people aren't doing their fact checking and how often it's because the authorities aren't giving out that information all fully. When I worked at NASA, for example, in the advent of GPS, you couldn't do elevation. The military kept that part of it classified. You could get your latitude and longitude, but they wouldn't tell you how high you were, the actual elevation of where you were, because they didn't want anybody to have that accurate a read on where anybody was. And then they deregulated it and they made it declassified. And now you can tell within a foot or two where someone is based on their GPS and their phone. But at first, to keep people safe, they were going, you know what, we're not going to tell you. So it does make me wonder if that's the kind of thing when you were doing this research, were they giving out different facts or not all the facts? And then somebody maybe embellished something as they were writing the story because they just didn't know.
I think sometimes people are lazy and they didn't realize that it would be that important to do the exact address. But, I'm ruining all that. I'm looking, and I would find some sources that would say it in detail. Were they lying? I can't tell you. I can't tell. But what I do say in the intro is that my book's only as good as the resources I had available to me. And I certainly did extensive research and I fact checked like 4 times. Um, but only as good as what's out there.
I couldn't agree more, especially with that. I've never tried to write true crime, and I probably never will because I am entirely too much of a chicken. So I admit it. I don't. There are things I tried to read really scary books when I was a teenager and went, you know what? I'm terrifying myself into not sleeping, so I'm not going to do that. And that was it. But I do want to pivot a little bit, and I want to ask you something that's a little bit more to do with the writing itself. There, when I talk to newer writers, so many writers they doubt themselves. They don't have a way of dealing with criticism versus critique. And you've written in multiple genres and you've taken a lot of creative risks. So I guess I want to know what your best advice is for writers who hesitate to get their work out there, either for fear of being rejected or for fear of being criticized.
Really good question because there are a lot of writers whose work is in their desk drawer and they keep putting it off because, first of all, a lot of people don't want to be published by small presses and they only want to be published by the big five, which is, good luck.
Hmm.
That's very hard and high. That's a hard thing to do and a high bar. Um, I really wanted to be read, so I didn't mind being with small presses. I just wanted
Hmm.
to get my work out there.
Hmm.
Uh, you have to have a thick skin. You have to be sort of a masochist. You have to be okay with people criticizing you. And the only way I can deal with it is say, anything I write, half the world's going to like it and half won't. And
Hmm.
I'm going to pay attention to the half that does. Because I'll take some of my favorite books. Gone Girl is one of my favorite books, and there's criticism about that. There are people who gave it 1-star reviews. I don't agree with that. I thought it was a great book. I mean, it started a whole unreliable narrator genre, and but there are people who don't like it. So am I going to spend all my time worrying about them, or I'm going to say I liked it and I'm going to write for the people who liked it? And half the world isn't a bad readership.
Yeah, 4 billion people. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Not that
good.
I've got those readers, because exposure to me is much harder than writing a book. But yeah, I think you have to pay attention to, you have to believe that you've written the greatest book ever, and everything you write is gold, because if you don't believe it, then no one else is going to believe it. Um, and there are going to be times when you're going to disagree with your critique partners, and you've got to stick to what you believe in. Um, and I've heard agents who used to say, just as an example, there were agents who would say, "Oh," or the general advice was, "You should never have movies as your comps when you're pitching a book." And I just had last year, there was an agent in Query Fest, which is something we do at Sisters in Crime New York, as you probably know because you're a member, um, where we had an agent who came on and said that was a great thing to do, to use a movie. It's totally different. And I did it anyway. I mean, for Deadly When Disturbed, I was pitching it as single white female, modern take on single white female. And other people have compared it to All About Eve or The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. When I was pitching Saving Grace, I said that it was a cross between Gaslight and Suspicion, because I believe there are more people writing movies than books. And I also think very visually, and I try to
Hmm.
write very visually. I try to write for the movie. One might ask, why aren't I writing screenplays? Which is an awfully good question. I don't know how to write. I don't know how to write a screenplay, but I'd like to learn. Um,
Ah,
I
I'll teach
probably
you.
would be, thank you, because I think I'd be better writing plays, because for me, the dialogue is everything, and the description, I'm trying to get better at it. But it's harder for me. So, but dialogue comes very naturally to me, and plot comes very naturally. So I think I do well in plays and screenplays.
Yeah,
Uh,
your dialogue, it's very conversational, which I really enjoy. As a reader of your books, I go, yeah, you can imagine people saying the things that they're saying in the book. And that to me, that's sort of a mark of a writer who knows how to write that way. Because often I'm reading a book and you're like, no, that just sounds stilted. And your work never sounds that way. It always sounds like I could be I wrote an entire play, Dawn, called Listen, which is all about a woman who eavesdrops on other people's conversations because I sat and for about 20 years, whenever I was in a cafe, I would eavesdrop on those conversations. And those conversations are literally in the play. So 20 years worth of eavesdropping is in the play because I love listening in on conversations. And that's how your work reads to me is I'm sitting in and listening in on a conversation, which I really love. So, but we're not here to talk about my play. What I wanna sort of talk to you, and you mentioned something about don't use comps like that are movies, for example, and other potential trends. But you've sort of carved out your own space. And I am going to just keep asking you for advice because I think that it's so cool that you're so generous with it. What is something you would say to someone who wants to write what truly excites them, even if it's not the hot thing in the moment?
say that the things are really groundbreaking are the things that people haven't written before. And if it's written well enough, or if the timing's right. I mean, look at 50 Shades of Grey. There are a lot of books that are S&M related that are better written than that. Um, but the timing was right.
Mm,
And she sort of struck, lightning struck for her. But I think, look at Gone Girl, there really weren't unreliable narrators ahead of that. So when you're people are like, oh, don't write anything that's different, but it's the things that are different that make the trends and set the trends. And I think you have to be true to yourself. But then again, stuff might not sell that well. It's a trade-off. What's really important to you? I know a lot of people who really want to be true to their vision. And if it doesn't sell well, big deal, because they at least got to say what they wanted to say. And there are a lot of authors who will write for years and want to give up, and then they just hit upon something. I mean, look at Adrian McGinty and The Chain. And I had a conversation with him online where he was talking about how he wanted to give up, and then that book kind of hit, and I think probably then his backlist sold because people wanted more of that. So I just write what sounds interesting to me, and I in the old days when I first started out, I mixed genres. Books didn't. I mean, I love the books, and they may not have sold as well, but I think they're selling better now because people liked the newer books, which honestly are more on genre. I would say that Deadly When Disturbed is straight on domestic suspense, whereas my first book, Expired Listings, was part psychological thriller, part satire, part kink, and didn't know what it wanted to be when it grew up. But I love that book. It's my favorite of all my books.
You never get over your first, that's for sure. But to me, I'm listening to you and I'm going, you wrote a book that you loved, and this is not to say you don't love your other work. I'm sure you do. But at the same time, as I'm hearing you, I'm going, okay, how do we reconcile as writers when this notion of you might write it and your friend and your friend's cousin might read it, but that's it, right? So if what you want is to be a prolific writer, but also one who sells, there are sort of, uh, I can't remember the English word for it. You have to sort of compromise, I guess, what your vision is in order to sell the novel to an agency or to one of the big five or one of the smaller agents. It doesn't matter to me, but do you feel like that is something that people should look at, or do you think stick to your vision no matter what is the way to go?
Think that there are enough presses out there, small presses, that you can usually find somebody that'll publish you if you're a decent writer. So I think you start with critique groups and you really get a sense of whether you can write or not, because there are a lot of people who are publishing who can't write. And then I think if you find even a small press, or if you self-publish because you really believe in the book, then it comes down to exposure, because I'm not the only one who's going to think this book is good. There's going to be an audience for every book, and it's a matter of exposing it to the right people. So my background's in marketing, and I'm constantly trying to find new ways to market my books. So, and that's all I'm doing right now. I'm in promo hell for Vacations Could Be Murder, New England. So, I mean, it's a matter of thinking about the book and who you can sell it to. So I'll give you an example. I wrote a book it was originally called Slashing Mona Lisa. Now it's called Murder Worth the Wait, weight being WEIGHT. And it is about, it's sort of like a modern day Elmer Gantry for the dieting world, where there's a traveling, what is the word I want? Ministry that goes from town to town, like Elmer Gantry did, and is talking about that you're okay the way you are. You don't have to lose weight. But he makes you buy a lot of materials and courses so that you believe that. So it's okay. So I'm sort of talking about how everybody will rip heavy people off, whether they are trying to lose weight or they're trying to feel good about themselves. They're it's open house for taking advantage. And that's what that book's about. And I'm a yo-yo dieter. And so this book was like cutting my wrists and bleeding onto the page. But the main character was Chamorro. She was from Guam, and it's a cub reporter who stumbled upon this plot against the diet industry and starts looking into it and investigating. And so I promoted it to the Chamorro community, and I promoted it to Weight Watchers, who actually gave it a good review, even though it was kind of anti-Weight Watcher groups. And I promoted it to body positivity groups, and just sort of thinking, what hooks does your book have, and how can you promote to those hooks? So more recently, with Vacations Can Be Murder, I'm I divided it up to every city that's mentioned in the book. And I'm contacting the historical societies and the local libraries for those towns, and I'm the chambers of commerce and the visitors bureaus. And then I'm contacting all the local press, whether it's radio, newspaper, television, the podcasters for travel and books and paranormal. So, and it goes on. That's not just independent bookstores. It's making me sick just thinking about it all, because I'm only a part of the way through. Um, Gift stores and metaphysical stores, because these are all people who might potentially buy in stock and sell the book. And so I think there's an art to that, but it's really the art of being organized and thinking about where can you sell the book. And I think that's how you get exposure, and that's how you get sales.
And mic drop. Yeah, I love that you said that, because I am not a naturally organized person, and I'm very grateful to my community. If you're listening to this and you've read my books, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm very grateful to my community, because they are ambassadors for my work. Because I like listening to what you said you were doing, I'm kind of going, oh, this makes me tired just thinking about all the work she's doing for this. But it's really true that you have to put yourself in that mindset of, who are my audience and where am I going to find them so that they can learn about my book, which I think is really cool. Because a lot of people say, oh, you finished writing a book. Congratulations. Now the hard work can really begin. Because then you have to, if you're self-publishing or an indie publisher, you're working like crazy to market it. And you're published through an agency, but you're still having to do all of this marketing, because the days of having the agency market your book, unless you're one of the top, I don't know, 4 or 5 authors in the country, those are long gone. So I guess what I want to know from you is, since you've seen both ends, what's the mistake that authors make when they're trying to promote their books?
That's an easy one. They don't do it. They don't have the time, because really I have to put aside the writing of the next book to do the promo for this
Mm,
one. So they don't want to hire someone. And quite honestly, it's very expensive to hire someone. And I hired someone for my Traveling Different book, the autism book. And I ended up firing them after 2 months because they were expensive and they were doing nothing. And I was able
mm,
to get articles in all of the major special needs publications on my own. I was able to get Costco connection, which pays very well. And that was very nice to have that all over the place. They have like 15 million readers. And I was able to get mentioned in USA Today. And that was me. And I have a PR background, but I mean, I think anybody, if they're organized and they really do the research and are willing to put in the elbow grease, they can do it. But they don't want to. And they
mhm.
just decide, oh, I don't know about marketing, and they don't feel like learning about it. And it's just, and regular fiction authors as well don't know. I mean, it's not that hard to look at your genre. And if you're friends with a lot of other authors, which I'm lucky enough to be, at least on Facebook, friends with a lot of authors, and just look at their feeds and see where they've been interviewed. And then to contact those interviewers and ask if they want to interview you for your book. Uh, it's just a matter of sitting down and thinking in a logical way, how do I do this? And then devoting the time to it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you completely. It is, you're holding up a mirror to me going, okay, Isolde, I know you want to be writing your book, but you also have this other thing that you could be promoting. And my husband is the same way. He's an artist and he doesn't want to ever have to promote his work, but in order for people to know about his work, he's going to have to talk about his work. He's going to have to promote it. But one of the things you and I met through Sisters in Crime, and one of the things that that allows you to do, like you said, you're Facebook friends, but you also have the people in Sisters in Crime who are people who are colleagues and cohorts and comrades in arms, if you will. And you're also involved with Mystery Writers of America. I guess the thing that I'm asking about is it could be for marketing, it could be for writing. What is kind of a more unexpected way that networking with all of these authors through these organizations has helped you as a writer or as in your career?
Well, I am a longtime author groupie, and you can ask people like Marshall Karp and Brad Parks who probably wanted to take out a restraining order. We kid around about it. These are wonderful people who have helped me tremendously, but I was very much, fangirly around them and
Mm,
gushing and saying, oh, because I really admired their work. I think they're
mm,
terrific. And that was very authentic. And they both helped me in my career, and gave me blurbs for the new book. I mean, I've got Catherine Ramsland, who's written 73 books. I think she's on her 73rd, and is like gets interviewed on forensic files. I mean, she's like the leading expert, as far as I'm concerned, on true crime. And
mm.
she gave me a blurb for Vacation's Gonna Be Murder. And she's a lovely, lovely person and fascinating. And I'm so lucky that I've gotten to meet these people. And I think it's just approaching them, you know, very authentically and appreciatively for their work, because I am an author groupie.
Mm.
Um, and I make no bones about it. I was like, oh, I just edited. I do editing for Down and Out, and I just edited a terrific book from an author that I can't wait till it comes out. And I'm actually trying to promote it for her. She doesn't know this, but I was mentioning it to Drew Ann Love. I said, oh, you've got to read this book because it's amazing. So yeah, I really love authors, and my surprise, I guess, is that they've been so generous with me, with their time, with their advice. I try to pay it forward. um they're very approachable people, they're lovely people that I've met, and that's my constant surprise, is that they're willing to give me time and advice, because a lot of them don't know me from a hole in the wall, uh but they've been there for me and they're supportive, and that's an amazing thing.
That's so phenomenal. I love that you said you called yourself an author groupie. I feel like that too, but I always feel very awkward talking to authors. Just whenever I talk to anybody I look up to, I get a little awkward. So I'm usually the person who's like, "Hi, it's very nice to meet you. I'm leaving now." And so, luckily, many authors are willing to come on the podcast when I don't feel awkward. So that's good. But I may be awkward, but I don't feel awkward. That's the difference. But the thing is, like you mentioned, you do developmental editing and you sometimes help other people like by ghostwriting and things like that. This is also different than the skills that you use for writing your stories. Can you talk a little bit about the editing world as a developmental editor, as a copy editor or line editor? I've sort of seen you do elements of both because you've edited my work before. Uh, can you talk a little bit about the difference in skill sets and what sets each apart for you as a writer versus an editor?
Oh, I think it's the same skills. I guess I'm editing as a reader, and I'm a prolific reader, although there are people who read a lot more than I do. But compared to the people in my house, I read a lot. uh, I mean, I know what's working when I'm reading, and again, the anal thing. I'm anal about the grammar. Uh, I don't know. I think the skill that has really developed in me more in editing is tact, because now I'm very gentle with the people that I edited, where sometimes I get really mad at people who make huge mistakes. but just in plotting or just in continuity. And instead of coming out and telling them I'm holding back. I'm editing a series of anthologies for Down and Out crime fiction based on different things. I did one that's based on the music, inspired by the music of Elton John and Bernie Taupin. Right now, I'm doing one on inspired by Broadway show tunes, and I edit even the ones that I reject. But the difference is that I am not sending the rejection editing back. I'm just saying, a lot of competition. I'm afraid yours wasn't the strongest story. In the past, I would have said, this is what you did wrong. I don't do that anymore.
So yeah, what's really interesting to me in the like again, when you were editing my work, and you're a phenomenal editor, you were very gentle, and I at some point honestly didn't know how to take it. I was like, is she just being nice? Or because in my own writing group, I bring my stuff and I go, okay, I'm ready for you to tear it apart. Now there are times when I'm not, right? When I'm like, this is new, I just need support. Don't give me anything that's wrong with it yet. I will need that later. But what I'm thinking is when someone turns in their work to you, that they have gone through it. Having said that, I probably didn't go in through the story that I just turned into you recently enough. But the point for me is that at some point, we as authors, as writers, have to consider our work complete. And so then we can hand it off to the editor or whatever else is going to happen to it. When do you think your work is done?
I can't stand reading it anymore. When I've rewritten it, and then I have the computer read it back to me so I can hear the flow, and I'll catch a lot of typos and I'll catch a lot of repeat words by doing that, a lot of echoing. And when I'm just so sick of it that I don't want to read it anymore, it's done. And then it's for somebody else to edit.
Just when it starts burning is when you turn off the stove.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think there are some people who just will never get published because they never stop editing. And there's a point where it's done, and you need another pair of eyes on it to tell you how it can be better. And it's not going to be your set of eyes, which is when people say they're self-publishing and they're self-editing, it's always a mistake, because I'm an editor and I need editors because they see things that I don't. And I'm very grateful. And one of the few I'm a writer who's coachable. Didn't used to always be that way. But I feel like I'm very coachable, and I appreciate hearing what's wrong, because that's the only way I can fix it. With my first book, I sent it to an editor, and he sent me his critique, and I made the changes and sent it back to him, which is what you should do. And he was shocked that I sent it back. He said a lot of the people who pay for all this editing was expensive, never sent it back because they couldn't deal with hearing that it wasn't the greatest story. And I'm telling you, you have to believe your stuff is the greatest work. I've said that on this podcast, but in the same way, you have to also be open to being coached and seeing where it might not be perfect, because then you can rewrite it, and then you could again say it's the greatest thing ever.
With a few minor tweaks.
Goodreads, and
right.
You read your Goodreads review, and then you realize some people don't agree with you, but it's okay.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing. Like you said, you have to believe in your work, because if you don't, who how can you expect anyone else to?
Right.
Absolutely. And so I'm grateful for that from you, because the last time you edited one of my stories, there were times when I was like, no, and then I went, no, 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 she's got your best interest at heart. And that's something that is apparent when I work with you, is that you really are trying to make the story better. That's the whole point. And I appreciate that very much. So thank you for being a good editor as well as a kind editor. I did want to, yeah, no, it's great.
Really good. But every story can be better. And yeah, I feel like I spend as much time on those anthologies as I spend on my own work, because it's not just my reputation on the line. These are all like people like you want new readers. You're contributing, I think, because yeah, it's fun to be part of anthology, but to me, it's to expose your work so you can sell your novels.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel that's a terrific responsibility to make sure that those stories are as good as they can be, because I'm trying to help your marketing, really.
Sure. And it's all part of that. Like you are it's a, I guess it's a snowball rolling downhill is the best way I can say it, because there is a symbiotic relationship there. Authors participate, but they also, once they've worked with you as an editor, might also come back to you for their next novel to edit or something else. So you're building relationships, which I think is great. And you get to include multiple authors and help them along the way while you're helping yourself and the company you're working for along the way. And I think that's a wonderfully, again, symbiotic relationship. What I want to do, because honestly, Dawn, I've got like 15 more questions I could ask you. And so there is that. But I would like to, there's something that you mentioned that you wanted to talk about. And it's something that I think a lot of writers struggle with, and that's inclusivity. Now, I'm not going to talk politics right now because it'll just give me a stomach ache and a headache. So I'm not going to do that. But I think we're living in a time where inclusivity is more important than ever, that we have to stick up for it. And that can be really hard for people. Being inclusive of all sorts of stories, of all sorts of people in your writing is challenging because perhaps you don't want to insult anybody or you don't want to appropriate any, there's a lot of uncertainty. And I would love to ask you about that part of it and ask you, what is something that an author can do to be inclusive authentically and to be respectful without falling into being someone who is culturally appropriating stories that aren't theirs?
Yeah, that's a great question. Being from New York and having my stories set in New York City or the suburbs, it's very natural to have all sorts of people, because all sorts of people are who you run into every day. So yeah, my characters usually have gay friends. I have a gay married couple in Deadly When Disturbed. And I don't treat them any differently. And maybe people will tell me this is wrong, but I treat them like every other person. I don't sort of make them different because they're gay, because chances are they have the same feelings and emotions. I mean, obviously they do, as everyone else. So I don't make the fact that they're gay the point. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like everybody else. This is
Mm-hmm.
just part of life. Meanwhile, I would not write a book from the viewpoint of a gay person, because I'm not. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel that that would be wrong, because unless I did a hell of a lot of interviewing and a lot of sensitivity readers, to tell me if I've got it right, um, I wouldn't write a book from the perspective of a trans person. I would definitely include them in a book. And as a matter of fact, I want to write a character who's non-binary, um, because I have a family member who is. So I already spoke to them about being a sensitivity reader and giving me the feelings and the advice to do that if I do write it. But I certainly wouldn't do it without that kind of input and critique. And again, the main part of that story is not that that person is trans or non-binary or whatever. It's going to be a murder mystery, and they just happen to be that type of person. I lost an agent over writing that Chamorro character, because she said nobody wants to read about a person from Guam and nobody wants to read about fat people. And I said
What?
goodbye, because I wanted to write that book. Um, and yeah, it didn't sell as well as the other books, and she could have been right. But I still have hope for it to find an author, because I published it right after Shrill became a television show. And I felt like I was going to be writing on the back of that, and that sort of body positivity feeling. And it just didn't take off, even though I think the book's really strong. And it is finding a readership now through social media and TikTok and Instagram. It's getting reviews, even though it's a couple of years old. because there is a readership for it. So now I've forgotten the whole training that I was saying.
We were talking about inclusivity in
Oh,
writing.
right. Yeah, I really was insulted by the fact that the agent felt that no one would want to read a book about someone who was overweight or had issues with body positivity. And I thought, well, you don't think the same way I do. And it's probably not a good relationship because I'm writing the book I want to write.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me because honestly, I don't know anybody who doesn't have at least some body image issues. So it's something that I would imagine the vast majority of us can relate to. So I think that agent was wrong, or that editor, whoever it was. I think they were wrong. And I think partially they were wrong because, and maybe actually, I'm gonna step back from that. I think the way I'm looking at it is sometimes you write a book or tell a story or create a song or do whatever that society isn't quite ready for, and then in a couple years, bing bang boom, they're ready for it. And so, I don't know Shrill. I don't know what, I think that's a TV show you were talking about. I don't know what that is. But for example, Lizzo coming on the scene when she did and being body positive. My favorite model, Ashley Graham, who is what they call a plus size model, even though she's like a size 12. Uh, we call her a plus size model. She's walked the runways in Milan. She's been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. She's voluptuous and beautiful and curvaceous and, bodacious and wonderful. And when she came along, things started to change. And we opened our eyes to the fact that women who have extra weight or more weight on them than they might want or whatever, all of a sudden we're in a situation where we can see it. And so maybe this book that you've written is now getting a better readership, not just because of TikTok, not just because of Instagram, but because what you wrote was a little ahead of its time. And now people are ready to see it.
Yeah, I just want to backtrack. Lindy West wrote Shrill. I mean, it's a book before it was a show, and it's definitely an interesting book. And there were several books about body positivity.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was this whole trend. And yeah, I think that I am getting more of a readership now, and it might be because, well, things are changing again. So who knows how long we're going to get to feel good about our bodies when we have to feel terrible about being women. And I
Yeah.
will talk politics, but I won't talk about them on your show.
Oh, no, no, no. You want to talk politics? I am happy to talk politics. That is
lose,
not a problem here.
yeah, I'll lose half my readership, and I don't really care. But I don't like what's happening now with people thinking that woke is a bad word, because I think we do need to be inclusive, and I think that anybody who's lives in this country deserves equal rights. We all pay taxes, and we all deserve to take advantage of everything this country has to offer while it still is offering it. And the fact that people are singling out a particular type of person because of who they love or how they identify, I find really horrible.
Yeah.
It's the best word I can use. I mean, it, it just it makes me sick. It's repulsive. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why how somebody else lives their life affects you or affects me. It's their business. Leave them alone. Mind your own business.
I think that's perfect. Absolutely. Absolutely. You and I are in alignment here that what's happening in so many ways is reprehensible, especially like woke. It's about being awake and aware, and they've somehow made being awake and aware a bad thing, which just boggles my brain on all sorts of levels. But there are those of us, I think, who are, and if you're, just so you know, Don, the people who listen to my show, the people who would have been offended by anything you said left years ago.
Okay. Just think you have to be kind. What is so horrible about being kind? I don't think we should be a country of bullies.
Yeah.
And what are we teaching our children, that the way to get ahead in the world is to bully other countries or bully other people because they make you feel insecure about the things you believe yourself, that you're sort of wondering, oh, am I right? am I wrong? Well, I better get rid of everybody who disagrees with me, because then everybody will say I'm right.
Yeah.
It's a sad state of affairs, and I hope it turns around.
Amen. Absolutely. Yeah. We've gotten to the point where intellectual rigor and critical thinking have become things that are bad, which I just don't understand. And will continue to tilt at the windmill of changing that back to where we are able to and are interested in thinking critically and checking our sources and all of that other good stuff, because it's critically important for us as a people, as a nation, as a planet, to be able to think critically about all of the incredible amount, just the volume of ridiculous stories that are coming at us from the 24-hour news cycle. It does boggle my brain. And lest we get ahead of ourselves or behind ourselves or something, I do want to continue with this conversation because I'm very interested in your thoughts on inclusivity and kindness, especially when it comes to the characters you write and the plot lines that you have, because a lot of your characters are not kind, because you are writing things that are from the imagination, of course. Some are based on true crimes about people who are, in many ways, terrible people. So, can you talk to me a little bit about you maintaining your equilibrium? You said earlier on that you just sort of have to divorce yourself. But I imagine with the extra pressure of what's going on in sort of the real world, writing these stories, is it cathartic at all for you? Or is it just I am separating myself from both the real world politics stuff and the actual horrible things that I find myself writing about in order to keep my sense of equilibrium and peace?
It's cathartic when the bad guys get their comeuppance. I definitely, because I control what happens in my stories, whereas I can't seem to control what's happening in the world. Um, I think I may, I've got a series I'm thinking about, which will be fiction when I get back to fiction. And those people will, anytime you solve a murder, there's a catharsis, but they're also going to be people that are kind and have unusual professions and do right by people. Um, and I mean, there's nothing I can do about the true crime books because that's just reporting. But I think I might write a romance. I was listening to the audiobook that's being done right now for Simple Tryst of Fate, which is one of my romances that I wrote during COVID because I couldn't bear writing about murder during COVID.
Mm.
And I'm listening to it and I'm really liking it. I'm saying, wow, I was good at this. I should write some more romance. If I say so myself, it was well written. And so I might got an idea for romance. I might try to squeeze it in between editing anthologies and writing true crime guidebooks. I'd like to squeeze in some more fiction, but they're going to be interesting people who do the right thing. And The Queen of Second Chances, here's a romance, a sweet romance where I included elder abuse, and I spoke out about elder abuse. And it had a happy ending, which was nice. And the attorney was fighting against elder abuse and was, you know, was successful in saving someone. And this is my sweet romance.
Even your sweet romances have an edge, I guess. That's the takeaway.
I try to talk about issues. In expired listings, it was the fact that being a realtor is dangerous. And it was also about how people in this BDSM scene aren't really, I made the realtors more perverted than the people with BDSM, and they would be the first to call themselves perverts. So I don't feel that that's being nasty. The Murder Worth the Wait was really about body positivity. Saving Grace was about mental illness and gaslighting. And really being a woman over 40 and sort of being invisible, and how that's sort of a marginalized community, and how you want to be heard once you're older. And, you know, consumerism, the companies really don't care about what you think. Nobody seems to care what you think if you're a woman over 40. And so that was sort of an allegory. That book was an allegory for that thought. And in I'm just trying to think. Well, there was elder abuse. in that. The Twist of Fate was really more about travel writing. It was sort of, there wasn't really a big point in that one, but Deadly When Disturbed talks about altruism. Nobody's really commenting on that in the book when they're doing reviews, but I'm really showing that there's two sides to altruism. And one of the sides is that some people do good things just for how they reflects upon them in the community.
Mm.
Nobody's really commented on that aspect of the book, but it's there. And I think it's interesting that nobody's mentioning that.
But you know, it's interesting because living in the social media world, if you will, we went from pre 2006, we went from that to everybody putting everything they're doing up online. Oh, I ate a salad. Here's a picture of my salad. Whatever you're doing, you're putting up. And I just recently have really stepped away from social media, except for here and there. And I'm realizing, A, I have a lot more time, but B, a lot of the things that I would normally have posted are just for me now, or just for me and the people I was with in the moment. And I think part of that is because all of a sudden I'm realizing, this administration is not safe. But also, should everyone be interested in everything else? And you're talking about how it reflects in the community. In other words, people know that you did this thing as opposed you, the character, as opposed to you just did it. And is that human nature, do you think, to need that kind of accolade? Or do you think it's partially because we're living in this everybody posts about everything kind of world?
I don't understand the whole idea about posting your salads. I mean, I do post about when I go to a show or when something exciting happens, usually having to do with writing, because then again, it's also marketing. Or something wonderful happens and I want to share it with people. But I don't understand just this minutia that you feel like. I think that there was this generation believes that everybody is interested in what they think, hence all of the reviews for everything. Um, my daughter, it was such a funny thing. We were talking about staying at a hospital, and she said, or they said, died on the table, 2 stars
Oh my.
for a hospital review. And it was really satiric because, yeah, people feel like they still give 2 stars, even though you died on the table. It was just the funniest thing. At least it was funny for me and my macabre sense of humor.
Hmm.
Uh, but there's everybody thinks that people care what you think, and really nobody cares what you think.
Mm.
I have no illusions. I don't believe anybody really cares about what I think or what I'm doing. Um, I post it sort of like so I have a record of my life, but not salad, just
Mm.
major milestones if I have an anniversary or and then I post a lot of fun stuff like dogs. I
Always fun.
Yeah, things that I feel like dogs kissing babies, things like that. Well, you'll see it and you'll feel better. Um, Occasionally a political statement, but that's sort of to rally the troops.
Hmm.
Uh, but I try to leave out a lot of minutia. Maybe people will call me on it and say, "No, you don't, Dawn. I should reel it back more." But I'm finding it hard to go on social media these days anyway because everybody is reporting on conspiracy theories, and I don't know what's true anymore and what's not. And I just
Hmm.
find it very stressful, and it's not helping my eating. You know,
Yep.
I think uh, I put on weight, and I blame I blame politics for it in the election.
Oh, it's stress eating is real.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing is one of the things that I'm posting a lot on social media, at least once a week, frankly, is remember to take care of yourself, get a lot of sleep, drink a lot of water, eat well, get some exercise, do something you love, step away from the constant news cycle because none of it is coming out good right now for almost everybody I know. And so we need to remind ourselves to take care of ourselves. And I think that that is critical, especially at this juncture, because we have at least 4 more years of this. So, but again, not to politicize this whole episode, even though, boy, have we been political. Dawn, I want to thank you so much for being here. And I want to ask you a couple more questions. The first of which is actually three more questions. The first of which is your social media. since we've just been talking about it, if somebody wants to find out more about you and your work, where should they go?
I'm on Facebook, and I probably spend the most time on Facebook as just Dawn M. Barclay or DM Bar, author DM Bar. And Instagram and TikTok, it's author DM Bar. I have to admit that I don't really, I'm on Threads and Blue Sky, and I don't really do much with them. So uh, I can only do so much. And so I'm not on them as much. I'm certainly not on Twitter anymore. Um, so yeah, that's where they can find me. And my websites are either dmbar.com or vacationscanbemurder.com. And I'm on vacationscanbemurder on Facebook as well.
Thank you for that. And I will say again, if you're listening to this and you are in need of an editor, I edit, so you can contact me, but I really recommend Dawn. She would work with you really well to get your story or book or novel or whatever it is you're writing in really great shape. And I have a couple more questions for you. So I want to thank you, Dawn, again for being here. This is super fun. It's always fun to talk to someone I actually know because I know we have a lot of in jokes, but also it's always great for me. It's a great feeling to help elevate the really cool work you're doing. So the last couple questions are as follows. The first one, the penultimate question, if you will, is what is it that gets you up in the morning? And I don't mean your alarm.
No, it's Harley, my pitador, half pit, half lab, very insistent at exactly 6 a.m. to be
Uh-huh.
fed. And we have a whole routine. I put her water in her dish, I feed her, I let her out, and of course she won't run out unless I throw a treat out. And then I line her marrow bone with cream cheese, and she likes her rooting behavior in the morning. And then she'll leave me alone for a while. But yeah, she wakes me up. What else wakes me up is I really love writing, and I really get excited about doing my research or doing writing and being able to really throw myself into it. I'm also a realtor, and so sometimes I have to wake up and do that work.
Boy, you never have a dull moment, do you?
No, I don't know how to relax.
I think, I actually was talking to my best friend about this, and with my scent allergies, going away is difficult because it's hard to know where some place is actually going to be scent free reliably. And she said we need to look up the sort of fragrance free hotel that is a spa where we can just go and just sit and get massages and have someone paint our nails while we lounge around near turquoise colored waters and just relax and do nothing for like 4 days. And I said, Kristen, sold. It has been so long since I've just relaxed that I'm not sure I could do it anymore. So I completely understand where you're coming from on that, Dawn. It is challenging to
You
relax
do as
sometimes.
much as you do as much as I, if not more. I mean, you do so much and have so many different professions and interests. So I think when we go to see chess together, that will be our relaxation.
Yes, we'll have dinner. And well, actually, Lee Asher, we're going to both see Lee
Yes,
Asher and have dinner after
really,
that. So
really excited about that.
I know I can't wait. If you're listening to this and you don't know who Lee Asher is, go look him up. Look up Asher House. You will do what he does. Wee is what he does when he meets new dogs. It's the most adorable thing, and we're gonna go hear him talk. If you are interested in serving the animal kingdom, if you will, especially dogs, even though they serve and protect a lot of different kinds of animals, the Asher House is an amazing organization that Dawn and I both love, and I just found out that Dawn loves it too. So we're gonna go see Lee Asher speak together. I'm very excited. So again, see, this is the problem, Dawn. I have so many other things I could be saying to you. And just so you know, my record for longest podcast episode is 3.5 hours. So you and I are doing really well coming in under an hour and
Yeah,
a half.
keep them going. God knows I like to talk.
Oh, and I no, and that's the thing though. Like when you and I are chatting, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. We are recording a podcast episode. I always say to everybody, this is like we're having a chat over coffee, and talking to you feels like that. So that's really cool. And that what the problem there is that it makes me forget myself. Oh yeah, wait, I'm recording an episode here. I should be paying better attention. Again, I'm going for the third time or fourth time or 12th time. Thank you for being here. I have this last question, and it's a silly question, but I found that it can yield some profound answers. And the question is this: if you had an airplane, environmentally friendly, of course, that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
The first thing that came into my mind was grow up.
All right.
That,
That's
that's the first thing that came into my mind. I mean, you can write be kind, but
mhm,
to me, it's like people are falling into the worst childish versions of themselves. Just
mhm.
grow up.
I couldn't agree more. That's realistic, snarky, and pragmatic Don Barclay there for you. So
I should have
yeah,
said
I
read DM Bar.
yeah, there you go. I absolutely. I had someone once go, "Oh, I would skywrite my Instagram handle," and I went, "Okay, then that is what you would write." But it was actually interesting because what I'm doing right now, and I've done it twice before. When I get to a certain number of guests, I put up an episode of just these answers to this question, and they are so profound, and yours will be among them. So so
I will tell you a funny story if I
sure,
can.
of
And that
course.
is my parents used to have a house in Southampton. Um, and they built a pool. And you have to get a variance to build a pool. And our neighbor didn't want us to have a pool. So he went and tried to fight it. We got the variance. We built the pool, or they built the pool. And then for my mother's birthday, we paid a skywriter, or it was a plane that had a sign following it, coming
Mm.
after it, as opposed to a skywriter that said, "Hey Jerry, how'd you like the pool?" And that was our gift to her.
That is funny. I don't some people, like you said, grow up. Okay? That's it. Just
Yeah.
don't be a
Our having a pool made his house less valuable. So what can you do?
uh,
We know
you
we no
know,
longer have that house, by the way. That
say that
was
again.
my parents no longer have that house,
Uh,
which was
so we can't all go into the pool now. Is that what you're saying?
it was a lovely house. I'm so sorry they sold it.
Yeah, I wonder that sometimes. The house you grew up in,
The
we
house the house I grew up in was demolished.
oh
There was
wow, so this is a
on
different
Long Island,
house.
but they had one in Upper Brookville, which a few years ago after my father moved out, they razed to the ground and built a different house. And then they had a beach house, which we no longer have.
Well, a beach house on Southampton would be lovely. And
Yeah.
now I want to go to Southampton and sit in a pool. Yeah, and it is interesting though. The house I grew up in, I'm an immigrant, so I lived in a bunch of countries before we came to the USA. And when we moved to the house I actually grew up in from the time I was 9 to the time I graduated high school, we lived in this house on Park Lawn in Oak Park, Michigan, right outside Detroit, literally across the street from Detroit. And there's a little mystery around this house that I never solved. Speaking of writing mysteries and mysteries in and of themselves, there was brickwork in the top front of the house that was a little arrow, and it pointed to a square that was not brick in that inset, like in the sort of roof of the house that you could see from the street. And the entire time I lived there, I kept meaning to go and find out what that darned arrow was pointing to because it looked like it could have been a little box. I don't know what that thing was. And none of the other houses on our block, that some of which were the same fabrication, the same style, none of them had that arrow except for my house. And I never found out what that arrow was pointing to, what that square in the middle of the brickwork was. That is a mystery I will probably take to my grave. Isn't that
Yep.
interesting that
You should
sometimes
you should take that to a book and you should write what it is.
I could make it up maybe better? That's probably I'd get up there and it would be just a little bit of something, cement or something. But yeah, you're probably right. I should write that in a book because it was interesting. Like as a child, I would look at it and go, what is there? And I once talked to my mother about, can I take a ladder and climb up there? I should have just done it and asked for forgiveness. But
Yeah.
instead, I was a good kid and I asked for permission. And she said, you under no circumstance are you going to climb a ladder anywhere. She thought it was dangerous. So, and I was a very goody two shoes little kid. I was as much a rule follower as you could possibly be. So I never did it. And I went back as an adult, and somebody else, of course, owned that house by then. And I really wanted to, sort of walk up to them and go, is it possible for me to take a ladder and climb up and ruin your rose bushes and see what's behind that square? So, and I never did. So maybe you're right. Maybe the thing to do is to write the story and imagine what was behind there.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Don,
Great story.
I know, right? Crazy. So I am again going to thank you for taking the time to be here. I appreciate your insights and your wisdom and your humor and your kindness. And again, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I am so glad. If you're listening to this, you know you need to go find out about DM Bar or Dawn M. Barclay, whichever way you're going to look for her work. Find her, read her. I love Saving Grace. I loved it. I'm a huge Hitchcock fan, and it's very Hitchcockian if you're reading it. So I think you will enjoy that if you enjoy Hitchcock. I am forgetting what I was going to say. Oh, yes, I'm Isolde Trachtenberg for the Your Creative Mind podcast, reminding you, as always, to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2025. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.